This is Scott Howard from Vast Data, and today I'm going to give a demo of a new feature that we have coming in an upcoming version. This feature is really bringing together two different features that we already have in the product, which is our vast database and the ability to audit all actions that are taken on the array. So Vast has had the ability to generate audit records for quite some time, but historically these were always stored in the file system in a JSON format. So this is very useful if you're wanting to load these into an external tool, such as Elastic or Splunk, but not so useful if you wanted to query them directly. You do need that external tool to be able to access that data. Earlier this year, we released the Vast Database, which is our on-system SQL queryable database. So obviously it made sense for us to take this data and in addition to being able to store it as JSON files, also feed that data straight into our vast database. So that's the new feature that we're adding. And you'll see here the configuration for this is exactly the same as for configuring our existing audit functionality. Just we get the additional option that as well as storing this as JSON files, we can also store it as a vast database file, a vast database table. And these options can be enabled either or, so you can have it going to one of these two locations, or if you want to both of them at the same time. The configuration around what gets audited is the same as with previous versions, so we can configure specific actions to audit, and then we can configure those at a cluster level, or we can go down to an individual view level to configure that auditing. Within the vast database, when we enable auditing to the database, the system will automatically create the audit tables. And you can see here the type of data that we store in that table. So it's basically the same information that we have for the JSON format with a few additional things added here, primarily the last couple on this list, which is the number of operations and the number of bytes. So being a database format, we can very easily update those as a user accesses the same file multiple times. We can just update the operations and byte counts and keep those as a single entry in the database. So let's jump over to the Vast GUI and have a look at this in action. So as you can see, we can access this data via the Vast GUI, both just a list of the recent entries from the audit database, but we can also come in here and query it based on a number of different fields. So let's look for a specific username that we want to look at all of the actions that this user has taken. We can execute that query, and as you see, it comes back very quickly with the data of what that user has been doing. But more importantly, we can actually access this via any tool that is able to connect to the vast database. So for example, if we jump over to a command prompt here where I have Trino running, then we can tell Trino to connect to that database. And then we can access the exact same data directly via SQL queries. So if we do a describe first to show the data in the table, you'll see the same output as what I showed before for all the different fields that we have available. And then we can just send simple queries through. So let's just start with a simple select query to see how many entries we have stored in the database. So you can see that comes back very quickly and tells me that I've got just under 800,000 records there at the moment. But let's look for a more specific query. So let's look for any data that is in a specific path, for example. So how many records do we have where the path starts with /data/? And very quickly that returns out of that nearly 800,000 records that we have, we've only got 13 records that match that path. So let's query and see what those records actually look like. Just pulling out a couple of the fields that we have available. And you can see here that we've got a number of different users. So the root user and my account accessing both that directory and files within that directory. And we can see there the actual actions that were taken. So of course, being able to access this via the command line like this is great. We can also use tools like our Python module to access this data directly, but often it makes more sense to do it via a tool where we can drill into the data. So as an example of that, here we have a copy of Superset. Superset, if you're not familiar, is just an open source query tool that is allowing us to query the data directly from the vast database. So in this case, we've just set up a few fairly basic dashboards that are accessing that data directly from the database and then allow us to query that data and drill down into it. So we've got a number of filters set up here. So you can see we have our same nearly 800,000 records that we were seeing before, but maybe we just want to look in and just look at just the last hour's worth of data. So when I apply that as a filter, Superset will go off, in this case, still connecting via Trino to the vast database and query the database to return the data for the last hour. And you can see that that very quickly updated with the data for that time period. We can also do things like just click on these graphs to be able to drill in. And every time I do that, that is again going to issue a new query through to vast database and return the relevant data. So let's just clear those filters and come back to the full view. So with this, we can do things like drill in for a specific user. So we can pick one of our users here, add whatever filters we want, and then see the full data of what that user's been doing on the system. So we can see here that user's been accessing a number of files. And as I mentioned before, the number of bytes and number of operations columns are new to the vast database for auditing. These were not available via JSON files just because we obviously couldn't update the JSON files, where the database we can by nature of being a database. So we can see the style of traffic that this user's been doing. We can also use this as a way of investigating something that happened on the system. So let's say we have a specific path that we're interested in. So I have a specific file that was deleted on the system, and I want to find out who deleted that file. So I can come in here and enter that file. I can enter the action to remove the file, and that will show me all of the corresponding records. So in this case, we've got two different records that match that criteria. So this user accessed this file and actually attempted to remove it twice. The first time failed with an access error, and the second time succeeded. So we might wonder, why did that fail once and why did it fail the first time and succeed the second? So with NFS, the permissions to delete a file are based on the directory. So let's just query and have a look at what happened at the directory level. And we can see all of the actions that were taken within that directory, and we can tell exactly what happened here. We can see that the user attempted to delete the file, permission was denied. So then we actually had the root user came in and changed the permissions on the directory, at which point the user did end up deleting that file. So very, very quickly, we were able to tell exactly what happened to our file and who was involved in it being deleted. In addition to this style of analysis, we can also use the audit data as a way of determining who our busiest users on the system are, as well as our busiest files. So in this case, again, very simple query. We're just listing the top users and the top files on the system. And again, with the ability to filter this. So maybe I just want to look at the last 6 hours worth of data. When I do that, again, it'll go off and query the vast database, and very quickly we come back with details of who our busiest users on the system were and the busiest files. We can also drill into these, so I can pick a specific user, and when I click on that, Superset will filter that data down, so I can see exactly which files that user has been accessing and how much data they've generated to those files. So this was just a quick introduction to the new vast audit files and vast database functionality that will be released in a future version of VAST. Thanks for your time.